Hello, and it's time for another episode of Never Punt, Never Parlay, a show that focuses on the game of college football, looking at it through the numbers of betting and through the lines and what that information can tell us. Along the way, we'll talk college football, we'll talk best plays, and have a lot of fun doing it. I am your host, Parker Fleming, and it does sound like my microphone's a little crackly, excuse me. So I'm going to introduce my co-host, Douglas Farmer, and ask him how he's doing today, and then try to reset my mic. Doug, how are you?
I'm doing well, Parker. This was something we troubleshot before the show, so let's hope it troubleshoots just as easily. I'm doing well. I enjoyed today's research more than usual because the MAC is the MAC. Everybody who loves college football loves MACtion. It's what gets us through the middle of the week. And yes, we're going to start today discussing the Big Ten, but then we're going to go into the MACtion, and it's the real absurd parts of college football that bring us back. And if Parker gets back in here, eventually he's going to nod his head and go, "Yeah, we've got notes here on coaches." It becomes an entire exercise just trying to understand the MAC, and that's its own. That's why we do this show. It's not just to discuss Michigan, who I'm not betting on today, but I very much thought about it. It's also to bet Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, Western Michigan. We're going to cover all of the Michigans, and that's our entire idea here at Never Punt, Never Parlay.
Yeah, and I love that we give coverage to inferring what you were saying there. I think we're on the same page. Love giving coverage equally to the MAC as we do the Big Ten, because of course there's important football being played, and there's value to be had and lessons to be learned across all levels of college football. So I'd like to get the opportunity to do that. And I'm excited to dive in today. Before we do that, very quickly, just to note, we are part of the Hammer, which is a network of content for people who are interested in sports and in betting. Certainly, you want to check out those other shows. Want to give a quick plug out to our kind of counterpart show on the Hit the Books YouTube. Make sure you subscribe there. That's where you'll get all of our plays, and then you'll get Brad Powers and Joey Nish on the on the main feed as well. So a lot of good content on our YouTube channel, and we're certainly fortunate to be part of the Hammer and to be here. With that being said, Douglas, let's get into some bets. How about that? Let's start with the Big
Look at
Ten.
the Big Ten. Parker, I want to make one thing clear. We're discussing the Big Ten. Our show colors are black and yellow, black and gold. We are called Never Punt, Never Parlay. This was unintentional Iowa trolling. Everything we're going to say today is intentional, but the colors lining up with Never Punt, we're sorry, Hawkeyes fans. We didn't mean to be this cruel. We honestly, but you did punt an average of more than 6 times per game last year, so you get what's coming to you.
Absolutely. And I think at some point the Iowa folks love punting. And yeah, this is just one of those little things that God lined up for us. So glad it is that way. Douglas, Big Ten, let's start like we're going to do most weeks. We're going to start with some totals, and we're going to start with a flyer, and then we're going to hit some futures. So why don't you go ahead and start me with a total you like in the Big Ten?
Anybody who grew up with me will be surprised to hear me back Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin, surrounded by Wisconsin fans. I was not a Wisconsin fan, and they're the kind of folk in that state, my home state, where if you're not a Wisconsin fan, you are a Wisconsin enemy. And that was how I grew up. Not a huge fan of the Badgers as a result. But looking at this season, they're bringing in Luke Fickell. They're bringing in Phil Longo as offensive coordinator. And this is an offense that already has maybe the best running back in the country, one of the best running backs in the country in Braylon Allen. And I know some people are going to hear Phil Longo, former North Carolina offensive coordinator, and a running back doesn't mix. That's a mistake. If you look back to the 2019 and 2020 seasons, North Carolina had that dynamic duo running backs, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. If you take their 2 seasons combined, those two averaged per game 103 rushing yards on 19 carries per week. Braylon Allen's not going to have 2,400 yards and 20 touchdowns this season, but Phil Longo will set him up to succeed. Is Tanner Mordecai going to be better than Graham Mertz? That's a low bar to clear. So when you have those aspects, you've got a power running back, which if you want to play Camp Randall, you need a running back in the band. They've got that. Last year, they went just 1-3 in one-score games. I think that combination flips it over of 8.5, neg 130 at DraftKings. I'm very comfortable with that number. They're going to be favored in 10 games minimum. There'll be a 2-possession underdog against Ohio State. I'm suspecting like right now they'd be a pick at Minnesota to close the season. But when you're going to be favored in 10.5 games and the over under is 8.5 wins, I don't know that the math is that difficult.
I totally love that. That Wisconsin play is great, and I love that point you make about you hear me talk about the rushing floor all the time with these teams, and I think having Braylon Allen certainly takes an offense like Phil Longo's that is often boom and bust, and certainly gives you a lot higher of a floor on a down to down basis because you'll be able to get in and out very easily. I'll point out two things before we move on to your next bet here with Michigan State. One. Did you see the video of Braylon Allen? I got to shout out my fellow weightlifting man. He was cleaning 405, and then he commented and said, "This is 2 years ago. You should see what I can do now." Love it. Love the energy. Big season out of Braylon Allen. Absolutely guaranteed here.
He is that kind of running back, and it's fun to watch, especially because the Badgers fans embrace that lifestyle. They return 4 offensive line starters, and they have 2 Cincinnati offensive line transfers. I'm generally low on offensive line transfers, but when it's players coming with a coach, to me that's a different type of dynamic. That works for me, and that furthers this thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Secondly, interested in some of those lines, and we'll talk about this on the show. Jim Leonard just signed on as a senior defensive analyst with Illinois. A lot of inter and Big West squabbles there. There might be some ramifications with game planning and always that big the motivation factor that we'll talk about sometimes.
Now, if you want, I can jump on to my other pretty confident win total, and it's a piece of my summer research so far. I'm not as far into September prep as I'd like to be because it's still July. But one of my notes at this point is Michigan State team total opposing overs. The defense is still trash. The defensive backfield is still trash. And if I have that note already in mid to late July, you know I'm going to end up on the Michigan State under. It's available at under 5 plus 110 at Circus Sports. And I don't know where the fifth win comes from. Sure, you're going to beat Central Michigan and you're going to beat Richmond in your non-con. And you've got Rutgers, Indiana, and Maryland as 3 winnable games in the Big Ten. But you have to win all 3 of those in all of reality because you don't get Purdue, you don't get Northwestern, and the other 6 games that Michigan State's going to have in the Big Ten are all games where they're going to be notable underdogs. To further this thought, Michigan State has only 3 true Big Ten home games this year. New quarterback, new receiver. Mel Tucker's expensive contract is going to feel more and more and more expensive. I will enjoy making money off him as much as he doesn't enjoy making money the next few years. Although I will say, I would rather hate making as much money as he does because, $90 million is worth a little bit of misery.
Yeah, I certainly he can find ways to cope with perhaps some struggles there. One stat that I circled about Michigan State and doing some prep today in 2021 with the Kenneth Walker season, Michigan State had a plus 48.2 percentage points difference in plays with and without a blown block. So that's run plays where they didn't mess up an assignment, they didn't let somebody run free. 48.2% difference. They were absolutely capitalizing on execution and being able to make the best of good circumstances. In 2022, that came down to 36.5, and their overall rushing rates success rate fell. So what you saw from Michigan State last year was fewer plays overall where they had perfectly blocked plays, and when those perfectly blocked plays happened, they didn't have as high of a ceiling on rushing as well. Some bad market fundamentals for Michigan State. They're in a rough place, and I agree the schedule certainly makes it hard for them.
And when you have Washington in the non-con, it's just another opportunity for this to go sideways. Real quick on Mel Tucker, I'm not saying there's going to be a hot seat conversation this year, but I think in November we might start that conversation on our level, and they're going to have to worry in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's extremely fair, and maybe ask themselves what we're doing here. I'll toss in a total as well. My first one for the Big 12, or excuse me, for the Big 10.
Big Ten.
I'm going to take Northwestern under 3 minus 110 at Circa. Northwestern under 3 here. Obviously, a little bit of a disclaimer about the Northwestern issues. Douglas, I don't know if you want to speak to those really quickly, and then I can give my reasoning for this play.
Well, we all know there's a lot more going on off the field at Northwestern, and Pat Fitzgerald is now a piece of the past. They've promoted defensive coordinator David Braun. David Braun, is that the name? I'm looking. Where's my Northwestern notes? There we go. David Braun. 8 months ago, he was the defensive coordinator at North Dakota State. So he has gone from a coordinator at the FCS level to a interim head coach at the FBS level, a Power 5 school, in just 8 months. So there is why we can't just ignore what's going on at Northwestern. There is a on-field handicap item that plays into it. Parker is trying to figure out his mic. He is, as you've probably figured out, traveling. But this off-field and into the courtroom issue at Northwestern does have a football effect, which is why we cannot ignore it as much as we are not equipped to have a deep conversation about what's going on there. You look at just the David Braun aspect, Northwestern, I'm going to spoil Parker's pick for him. He's going to bet the under 3 wins. It's available at neg 110 at Circus Sports. Our good friends at Circus Sports still have the best odds on that one. And you need a 4th win to bust that. And I don't know how an FCS coordinator 8 months ago is going to find his way to busting that. Parker will eventually have a whole bunch of stats that baffle me, because that's why I'm here to make him look smart. He already is. When I'm confused by his EPA numbers, but I'm sure those are another aspect of this Northwestern play, not just the off-field tumult.
Absolutely. On field last year, Northwestern was nothing short of a disaster. Douglas, they were 121st in expected points per play margin, EPA, right? That just takes down distance and yard line and puts it into a single point value and helps us understand the value of plays a little bit better compared to something like yards per play or success rate. So they're 121st, 127th on offense, and a kind of respectable 52nd on defense, but the offense was so bad it didn't matter. They were overall second in the nation with 9 broken plays on offense. Now, that's not where a play where something went wrong. That's a play where things were so wrong that it completely fell apart, just absolute disaster plays. And they only had a plus 1.9 percentage point difference in success rate on plays with and without pre-snap motion. So a lot of teams you'll see will be able to use motion effectively to create leverage to overcome deficiencies. Northwestern had nothing in the bag. No one's coming. The cavalry is not arriving. You put all of that storm over. Then you look at the offseason nonsense. You look at the schedule. They're going to be favored against Howard and UTEP and
that might be
nobody
it.
else. That might be it. So schedule's not great. They're in a bad situation. I think this could be an abysmal year for Northwestern as they deal with the fallout of kind of an offseason coaching change. And obviously this guy moving up from an FCS defensive coordinator to an FBS head coach just in the course of a couple of weeks.
It's one of those things that I hate all of what's happened there, but on this very specific item, you and I are the kind of people who hear an FCS coordinator jumps up to a Power 5 coordinator, and we're excited to see what comes next. We're excited to see what wrinkles he can bring in, and now that's going to be torpedoed given the situation. David Braun will certainly be coaching with no pressure this year, so maybe he gets a little creative, but I don't know how they. I mean, they open the season at Rutgers, and say what you will, Greg Schiano's going to find a way to make them hurt. It's his bread and butter. They go to Duke, and they lost to Duke last year, I believe. And Duke is this team that we'll get to the ACC next week, but Duke is good. And those are your games that you're hoping to stack early. It's just an ugly situation is going to get worse on the field for Northwestern.
Absolutely. And the games you would think they could win potentially if they got something going towards the end of the season are all clustered at the beginning too. So just a really bad spot here for Northwestern. So I'll take the under there. Douglas, I'm going to point out something really quickly. We're about to announce our flyers and talk about a flyer bet, just a bet we think, not going to count against the record, maybe put some pizza money on it. Nothing intense, but a reason why we might like this bet. And I like that we have similar bets, but they're different. That just speaks to the power of shopping, creating angles, and looking at these bets differently and how you might go about maximizing your win probability in long-term gambling by considering options by shopping. If you click or snap rather that little QR code that is in the bottom, looking at this now, looking down here, I think the bottom right of the screen, bottom my right, your left, is going to let you sign up with BetStamp. That's going to be a promo that just goes directly to us, not to us, directly to supporting the show, and doesn't take anything about whether you win or lose, only when you sign up. So just a good way to get in there with BetStamp and find ways to shop for different lines there. So make sure you sign up there. I am going to Let's talk about our flyers. I think, Douglas, we can say both of them at the same time, and then we can go there. So I'm going to take Nebraska plus 6,500 to win the Big Ten overall at BetRivers, and you have Nebraska winning the West, I believe, at plus 2,000. That can be found at BetMGM currently. So I think we'll talk a little bit about the differences here, but talk to me about why you might believe in Nebraska, why you might take a flyer on this bet.
Well, clearly I'm high on Wisconsin, and we'll get to that further. But I'm high on Wisconsin. We discussed that earlier, and I will come back to it. You look at the West; it's 7 teams deep, but one of those teams is Northwestern, so it's 6 teams deep. And I'm not real high on Purdue, so we'll write them off. First year head coach, return only 11 starters. They get Ohio State and Michigan out of the East. That's a bad draw. You get to Illinois, and yes, Brett Bielema and Jim Leonard are going to have it out for Wisconsin in a few weeks. We'll see. We'll see if that's enough. The offensive line has some issues. Their quarterback has some issues. So I'm out on Illinois. You get to Minnesota. They're coming up on an offensive cliff. They're losing an all-time program running back, an all-time program quarterback. They're going to lose. They return only 2 offensive linemen. Pretty quickly here, I'm down to Wisconsin and Nebraska in the West, which is why I'm willing to take that flyer on Nebraska. They pull only Michigan out of the East. And I'm going to say a name here, and I'll be shocked if he wasn't part of what you're about to say. Quarterback Jeff Sims out of Georgia Tech might be an ideal Matt Rule quarterback. He's got 1,600 career rushing yards once you adjust for sacks. They have 120 career starts returning on the offensive line. And I know I'm talking to a stats guy who hears that as a statistic, 120 career returning starts. It's a flawed stat, but it is pertinent. If any position group it's pertinent, it's the offensive line. Nebraska might be able to cook something up, and they've got a favorable schedule. And the West, in my opinion, is not as strong as it usually is. Oh, and I forgot to mention Iowa. Well, they punt too much.
As viewers of the show will constantly be reminded, Iowa does in fact punt too much. Yeah, you said a lot of my reasoning there. 39th in returning production. Sims is really fun. They get Michigan early at home. They get Iowa at home as well. Rule has shown that he can take programs in certain directions, and particularly that he can kind of patch holes where there are holes in a quick amount of time. I don't expect I don't expect great things out of Nebraska here, but I do think that the probability of them winning the West is high enough to make this a value bet. You could obviously hedge or cash out in the championship and still come away with money as well. So the flyer with plus 6,500 for the entire conference is probably great, or is a good bet. I think that the win the West at plus 2,000 also really nice one to make. Again, just as a flyer, just as a what might be an interesting long shot here. Program building is obviously not a 1-year process, but Matt Rule does have a history of program building, and they do have some pieces that are really interested, coupled with the returning production and the line. Yeah, I think I'm okay saying Nebraska's pretty interesting here.
I think knowing me and knowing you, it will be rare that you take the riskier play. So I'm glad we get one of those to help me feel better when I, like take 1,000-to-1 bets every so often.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about futures. And again, just to clarify, as we're building up this show and the regular cadence, so that was a flyer. We're not going to count that against our record. We're not going to dunk on anyone if we said, "Hey, Nebraska, look, I'm so smart." We're just saying this is interesting, and this is how we would think about maybe making a play here. We're going to switch back and take a future for each. For the Big Ten here, and this isn't a play that we will track, a play that I will absolutely dunk on you if it comes to be true. So let's start with your bet, Douglas. Let's talk about your future, and again, why you want to talk about Wisconsin and believe in them.
It is still the Big Ten West. I am taking Wisconsin to win the Big Ten West. I've got it at plus 130 at DraftKings. And here is where you want to use that QR code, because you can use that and just get signed up for DraftKings. There's a shortcut in there to get you to the sports books. And you want to shop around. This is available at even odds at other places, but at DraftKings, it's plus 130. I ran through the Big Ten West there for you. You know how I feel, but it gets better with Wisconsin. They've got Nebraska in Madison as well as Iowa in Madison. Those two aspects alone give them an added advantage, obviously, to win the Big Ten West. And if I'm this low on Purdue, if I'm this low on Illinois, if I'm this low on Minnesota, and I'm willing to make it just a 2-horse race, Parker can go ahead and keep saying we won't put any money on the Flyers. I will put enough money on Nebraska 20-1 to protect this Wisconsin at plus 130. If I think it's that much of a 2-horse race, I will set myself up there. Maybe I'll look at it a little bit more and think, no, I'll just take Nebraska to win in Madison as an underdog, and that's how I'll cover it. There are ways to protect yourself in those moments if you feel as strongly as I do that it's that narrow of a field. I didn't take Wisconsin to win the Big Ten as a whole because they're going to be right now, they'd be about 2 touchdown underdogs to Michigan or Ohio State. And the hedging and that opportunity against a plus 900 is just going to cut so far into it. I'd rather just take this 130 and be good.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense over there in the West, especially if you're going to go with the over 8.5. I'm going to flip to the other side of the conference for my future bet here. I actually really like Penn State plus 600 at FanDuel right now to win the East. And I know that look, it's like Charlie Brown holding the football, and you're going to say, look, they're not going to do it. It's not going to happen again this year. But things I like about Penn State, I think they've got a higher ceiling at quarterback now. I think that they get a receiver in Dante Cephas from Kent State, who was on the midseason Blitnikoff list. And last week we talked about dudes and wide receivers, and they were only Power 5 guys. Dante Cephas qualifies because he's moving up to Power 5. 6.6 yards after catch, 14 or 15.5 average depth of target. Dante Cephas is a dude. He gives Penn State an explosive ceiling on offense. In 2022, they were 55th in offensive EPA per play, 7th in defense. I expect the defense to be there. They're 24th in defensive continuity, or returning production, rather. And on offense, they were 55th in EPA per play, expected points added, but they're 102nd in returning production. Obviously, turning over the quarterback is going to do a lot of that. Obviously, the loss of wide receivers is going to do that. But I think Cephas coming in and the talent level they have, they're right there. They split. They get at Ohio State. They get home Michigan. And listen to how the schedule breaks down, Douglas. UMass, Ohio State, Indiana, Maryland, Michigan. You're not going to get a back-to-back. You're not going to get a body blow. You've got a lot of time to get some reps and stay healthy. If Penn State can stay healthy, if they can split Ohio State and Michigan, they should make the Big Ten conference championship, or the Big Ten conference championship game. They should be favored over the team in the West. And just using S&P plus as a kind of back of napkin math here, back of envelope math, 55% chance, not accounting for home field advantage, they win at least one of Ohio State and Michigan. That's all you need to make it to the championship game. I like Penn State plus 600. The implied odds on this are 11, Vig Free are 12.18. Are 14.29. The Vig Free is 12.8. I think it's a better chance than that, obviously, given the implied rate of them winning at least one of Michigan and Ohio State. So call me crazy, but Penn State last year had about as good a season as anyone could have asked for. They lost to two teams who made the playoff. Otherwise, they beat everyone else on their schedule. They're in a really good spot this year, and I think if they can just get one of those games, they can be in the conference championship and be favored. This is a bet I like here. Penn State plus 600.
The way you were talking about that started me thinking a different paired. So I'm gonna kind of riff on it real quick. You mentioned if they can split Ohio State, Michigan, you like their odds of making the Big Ten championship game. The easy way to say that's wrong is if Ohio State or Michigan goes unbeaten. Remember, Ohio State, Michigan, last game of the year. So going into that, you'll have a chance with a 6-1 ticket in your pocket, and you're assuming Penn State can beat the West, as you should assume. You'll have a chance to basically hedge out with whichever team already has that loss in the big game to end the season. There's an opportunity there to get Penn State at 6-1, assume they split those, and then hedge and protect yourself a little bit in that closing finale. And I like times where you can plan that out ahead of time and set it up in motion in July and know, in November, if things go okay for me, I'm in a position to profit.
Yeah, absolutely. And with futures, there's so much game theory and if then, if that, or whatever. But I feel like you've got a couple nice either outs or hedges with this Penn State bet as well. And I think there's a decent chance they actually do find themselves in the Big Ten championship game. So yeah, that to me is one I like a lot. I think that concludes. Did you have anything else in the Big Ten? I don't think we did.
Well,
We'll
you
recap
mentioned
at
Penn
the end.
State, and it
Oh,
makes me think of James Franklin. And I don't know how much money he's making these days, but you know what he could probably use, Parker? He could probably use $14 million. And you know who could give James Franklin $14 million, if not for NCAA rules and laws and things like gambling is outlawed for head coaches of football teams? Circus Sports with $14 million guaranteed in two contests this football season, between the Circa Million with $6 million guaranteed and Circa Survivor with $8 million guaranteed. That's 14 guaranteed $1 million. That is a James Franklin, Mel Tucker-esque take home. Those are both NFL contests, we should note, so nobody gets confused. But if you want to join them, it's only $1,000 each to get in. You have to register in person at Circa in Nevada by September 9th. And you got a little more time because it's the NFL. 14 guaranteed $1 million to me is enough reason to pause us here and mention that and think about James Franklin and Mel Tucker, and even they could use that kind of money. After that, now that we've thought about that, we'll get to the MAC, things that don't generally invoke ideas of $14 million. Maction, we all know it. We all love it. College football fans have the day will come that the MAC is not on Tuesdays and Wednesdays every year, and we won't really know how to handle it because it has become such an ingrained part of the college football season.
I hope that day never comes. What a segue there, talking about $14 million and bringing up the Mac. Yeah, I think a couple interesting picks in the Mac here. I will say, I said this to you privately. My model is so good outside of the Mac, and I get absolutely torched every year. And when I see someone post their record in college football and they're not picking every game, yeah, I'm like, look, man, you got to take your lumps in the Mac with the rest of us. All right, it's volatile, it's a cruel and vexing puzzle. But I think there's still some value to be had in the Mac, and it's certainly fun and certainly a huge part of my college football watching experience every November as we get those weeknight games. Let's start with the total. I believe we each have one. I'll defer to you. I'll let you go first. Tell me about your favorite Mac total.
I preached it last week. I'll preach it this week. I'll preach it every week. I like to shop. A little behind the scenes here, folks. I create a spreadsheet so Parker doesn't even have to do the shopping himself. He knows where the best lines are available. And in shopping the MAC win totals, I found 3 teams where I could possibly middle their win total. And I looked at them each. Western Michigan, Lance Taylor's a very intriguing hire, but I don't know that I want to commit 2 units to trying to middle them. Northern Illinois, I'm down on. Some other people, Parker, are not. Then I got to Ball State. Ball State's win total is under 5.5 at FanDuel. You got to pay. It's juiced a little bit to the under, neg 142. Their quarterback went to Illinois. Their star running back, Carson Steele, went to UCLA. They lost most of their receivers. They lost half their offensive line. You like to say, Parker, when it comes to the Big 12, that it's a league where it's a development cycle. And I think that's true of the MAC, too. You got to figure out who was on the upward trajectory of their development cycle. Ball State is on the downward side. People want to tell me, look, they brought in a quarterback transfer. Congratulations. You brought in a quarterback transfer from Texas State. Things that do not get me excited are quarterback transfers from Texas State. No offense to Lane Hatcher. Maybe he has a great year. Even if he does, he won't be able to do it all on his own. I did not end up middling this. I could have gotten it over 4.5 because I don't know that Ball State's going to get to 5 wins. So I'm taking the under 5.5 at FanDuel, but I didn't middle it because I'm that confident in this at this point. I don't think they get to 5. This team has lost too much. You bring in a quarterback who started out prolifically at Arkansas State, had an okay season at Texas State. I'm expecting more okay at Muncie, and okay at Muncie this year is not going to get it done.
Yeah, I think that there's an argument maybe for Lane Hatcher and saying like the talent differential between maybe a Texas State and Mac is, I don't know, enough potentially to be interesting. But
Is
he
it?
comes into a
Is it?
situation where they lose they lose Carson Steele, and again I'll reference this graphic every time that I can. But if you just plot a scatter plot of yards before and after contact, Ball State was all the way to the left. They were just absolutely one of the worst teams in yards before contact, and one of the best teams in yards after contact. The underlying fundamental there is Carson Steele did a lot of lifting in a very bad situation, and yeah, it looks like they're going to be a little hollow, unless I don't know, maybe in Muncie they have Carson Steele's growing on trees. I'm not sure, but I'd be skeptical that
I've
the
been to
replacement running
Muncie,
back is going to be able to do
and
that.
I can personally confirm they do not have Carson Steele's growing on trees in Muncie.
Yeah, in that case, then under 5.5 seems like the move here for Ball State. Maybe a rough season there for the boys in Muncie. I'm going to take another. I'm going to take another under. So we're going a little negative on the ball on the Mac here, but
We'll
I
get to the
refused.
positive.
We'll get to the positive. We got positives here in the Flyers and the futures for sure. Douglas, I refuse to believe in Jason Candle. I just can't do it. I just can't bring myself. I've seen the evidence. I've considered it. And I think they might win the conference this year. But 9 wins is so many for a team that absolutely cannot get out of their own way. Last year, they were 62nd in offensive EPA per play. They were 21st in defensive EPA per play. But they were 108th in net field position. Their average starting field position was 113th on defense, 85th on offense. And this offense was just middling all around, even as fun as DeQuan Finn is at quarterback. I think that they're just really they're talented relative to the rest of the roster. Their roster is talented relative to the rest of the conference. The issue is that they can do some of the down to down business of playing football, but I do believe from a programmatic standpoint they cannot get out of their own way. They are guaranteed to lose a stupid game. You look at their non-con with oh my gosh, I lost my tab for the non-con there. They have Illinois, I know, and then they have I think Texas Southern, and then they have a oh, who's the
I didn't
third
write
one?
it down, Parker. I'm not going to be able to bail you out.
I lost it. I'm gonna bail it out live. There we go. Switch the tab. I found it. And excuse me, San Jose State, who's a team I think could probably take a win there. Then you're looking at them having to go what 8 at least 8 wins on their last next or their next slate. The kicker for me is that they have 5 of the last 7 on the road. I think they have 11th in returning production, but again, I think DeQuan Finn's ceiling is what it is, and their talent is not well distributed. And the special teams issues here, I just don't trust. I don't trust Toledo to get over that 9-win hump. I don't trust them to do much more in terms of hitting that 9-3. I think it's just a little bit too much with what we've seen out of them this year. So I'm going to go under on Toledo. I'm going to trust that the Jason Candle effect is going to be in the downward direction again this season.
You were being awfully polite there. I don't trust Toledo. I don't trust Toledo. I don't. What you mean to say is you don't trust Jason Candle. And
Yeah,
and I went and pulled up some history here, and I don't. I didn't warn you about this. This is going to be his 9th season at Toledo. He's won the MAC twice now, 2017 and 2022. In those other 6 years, Toledo was never picked lower than second in their division in the preseason media poll. Media poll we're going to use as a commiserate to odds because I can't really go pull up past futures odds. Usually, if they were second, it was barely. It was by a point or two in the media poll. Do you know what his average finish was in those 6 years where they didn't win the MAC in his division?
you're going to tell me it's second.
3.67. He finished in the bottom half of the division as often as he has won the division. Toledo is the odds favorite to win the MAC, and they couldn't get it done for years, and now we're expecting them to go back to back. When typically people are high on Toledo, it means Toledo's going to finish fourth. I don't understand it, and this is one of the things about the MAC why we like it so much. You get microcosms of college football. We have a coach here who tried to leave. He tried to go to Miami, if my memory serves me correctly. You get some of the industry here and the struggles of this. It's like Kent State just lost. Where'd my note go? I wrote down the
Sean
name. I
Lewis to
wrote lost
Colorado.
Sean Lewis to Colorado,
Andrew Souter
and
went to
it's this.
Minnesota. Yeah.
This is where the MAC. It's always been a coaches league, and now they're losing the coaches. The one clear silver lining on this, and I don't have a bet on Akron, but it's Joe Moorhead's second season, and I think a year or two from now we could be talking about Akron. The talent deficit right now is still too huge, but I did
Right.
look up 2 years ago before Joe Moorhead got there. They scored 20.3 points per game in the MAC. That improved by a touchdown last year. In one season, he added 6.3 points per game in conference play. There is something there, and that is something to keep in mind with the MAC. It's so often about the coaches, whether they're leaving or you got somebody like Joe Moorhead getting creative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that the only dampening that I would put on that is like there's also some signal when a guy stays in the MAC for too long. So like Jason Candle should have moved on like by now, like if he was going to make that step. And so when you have that coaching effect, that is a little bit of a red flag. It's almost like, and I'll kind of link some stuff here, but like it's almost like Matt Campbell not getting the Notre Dame or the USC job, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe there's a reason that he's staying at Iowa State. That doesn't mean he can't be successful at Iowa State. That doesn't mean Jason Campbell can't be successful. Hey, look, grow where you're planted, Douglas. But sometimes where a guy's planted does say, and how long he's planted there does say a little bit about him. So I'm just very skeptical in trusting him, especially with the back-to-back reality and those 5 of 7 on the road there with the talent level. It's bigger, but one injury, and we're looking at a spiral season here. So I'm going to go under with Toledo. Let's talk about Flyers again.
I
Looking at
have
timing here, I want to make sure we
I have an
are a little bit
exception
snappier.
to your
Oh,
I have an exception to your bit of a coach staying too long, and that is my flyer. Some coaches stay in the MAC because that's where they succeed. Frank Solich out in Ohio, Chris Creighton at Eastern Michigan. He's entering his 10th season. Do you realize that this is in program history before he got there, they had 7 seasons with 6+ wins? They've done that in 5 of the last 6 years if you exclude 2020. When you look at what a program can do, Chris Creighton has raised the roof at Eastern Michigan so far. And he opened there 3-21, but since then they've averaged nearly 7 wins a season. I look at them. If I'm down on Toledo, well, then who do I think is going to win that division? I think Eastern Michigan. And I can get Eastern Michigan as high as 8-1 at Caesars. And again, you can just go sign up for Caesars via the QR code there. BetStamp makes it easy for you. I can get Eastern Michigan at 8-1 to win the conference. If I'm down on the front runner in the division, why would I not jump on that number 2 team of Eastern Michigan? Some people have Northern Illinois up there, but if you look at the odds, they're not in that same mix. And so I'm going to trust that discrepancy and lean into Eastern Michigan. Chris Creighton has found a way to win at a place that was previously unwinnable. Last year, they won their first bowl game since 1987. The next thing for them to get done is to go win the conference.
Yeah, I like it. And I like what Chris Creighton's done, kind of quietly building there. And the Michigan schools are interesting. Western Michigan fired Tim Lester, who holds a special place in my heart for being a math guy, for having a binder, but they felt like he wasn't just getting them to the top every so often. But I like that. I like that Chris Creighton flyer. Again, it is a coach's league. I'll even do you one further and say I think it's a coach's league. I also think that quarterback and experience matters here. And look, man, Rocky Lombardi's Rocky Lombardi. We know exactly what that is. Shout out to Rocky. His dad DMs me on Twitter sometimes. I really like talking to him. But he was hurt last year. Like, very obviously didn't play a bunch and had some issues. But when he did play, third highest passing grade in the country from Rocky Lombardi from Northern Illinois. When he is healthy, which he is purported to be, they are a different team. That gives them a huge, huge advantage in this conference if he can be healthy. And so I think that the flyer here is you got to go with the most experienced, high ceiling quarterback in the conference. That is undeniably Rocky Lombardi. Oh, are you disagreeing with me?
I can think of another quarterback who might have a higher ceiling, but that I'm going to discuss in a few minutes. But we'll let you finish this, and I won't point out that last year Northern Illinois went 1-2 in one-score games. You're betting on their 2021 record of going 6-1 in one-score games. That was never sustainable. I think if you wipe out 2021, you get a better idea of this program as a whole. SP Plus considers them the fifth best team in that division.
Yes, absolutely agree with all of that. And when we're talking about a flyer here, you're talking about the average. I'm talking about the tail end. I think they've got a tail end of the distribution that no one else has. If you look at the implied odds, so the flyer I took was Northern Illinois plus 2,500, and that's 3.26 when you take out the VIG percent, 3.26%. Rocky Lombardi, experienced quarterback, high ceiling. I can see it. I can see that, hey, maybe this happens more often than 3.26 by the numbers there. So, again, just a flyer I'm taking, but I like the experience of Rocky Lombardi. I think they were a really bad team without him, and with him, they were a pretty okay kind of bad team. And so whether he can be healthy for the entire season really, really raises their ceiling.
I'm happy for you that you're making that bet. It is the rare moment where I think you're well off base, but that's what we're here for. For me to look foolish by saying you're wrong.
Or you to roast me. I don't know. The people like that too. Look at my Twitter mentions, man. It get you some engagement there.
Well, I will say you mentioned Rocky Lombardi might be the best quarterback in the conference. Are you forgetting about Ohio's Curtis Rourke? He is. It's become a common aspect of life that Ohio has a good quarterback. They're returning 15 starters, and now here's the part that sold me on Ohio. Do you know what their against the spread record was in conference play last regular season?
I know they were like 10 and something. They were like 10-2 on the season. They were
I'll
something
give you a
very good
clue.
on the
They played
season.
8 conference games in the regular season. Yes, they went
I
8-0
would.
against the spread.
Yep. Yep.
You with an improved offensive line, 15 returning starters, and a quality quarterback, I will gladly take Ohio at plus 280 to win the conference available via DraftKings. I will take that and I will chuckle. I think Ohio should be ahead of Toledo in this conversation. That's in part because Toledo won last year, Jason Candle, yada, yada, yada. But the fact that I'm getting this at $1 better than you can get Toledo, I am thrilled with that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, it's a similar thought process for Northern Illinois. Go for the high ceiling experience quarterback. They've got the returning production on their side. I do believe Northern Illinois is 12th in returning production. I don't know. I said that out loud, but I think they're pretty high as well. But I like this a lot. I think that they're solid. And the difference that they have versus Toledo for Ohio there is that I think their variance is much smaller. Toledo, way higher variance. And a lot of times when you're the favorite, that variance is only going to hurt you, right? The weirder things get as the favorite, the worse you're going to be. Ohio, a little bit more steady Eddie, a little bit more consistency, a little bit more doing the business of special teams without so much nerve wracking and nail biting. I like this play. They've been a quietly consistent team. And I think a lot of people thought they were going to fall off the face of the earth when Coach Solich retired. But I do think that they are consistent. I like this one a lot. I am realizing in our notes now I don't have a future. So I'm just going to say my flyer is Northern Illinois. I know.
I made sure, and I believe your claim was, I'm scared of the MAC. I don't like watching midweek foot. You definitely didn't say any of that.
Okay, I didn't say either of that. What I think I said was what I said earlier, is that the MAC is a cruel and vexing puzzle. My record is not amazing with the MAC, so I like the flyer of Northern Illinois, and I like the under on Toledo, but I don't know that I have a value play. And far be it from me, Douglas, to give action just to have action. And so I'm gonna respect the process there and not have one.
Not giving action just to give action. I am effectively fading Toledo with my two futures plays. The flyer of Eastern Michigan is fading Toledo in the division, and the futures play of Ohio is fading Toledo in the conference. So in that sense, we're very much aligned with your initial underplay. So while we're at it, Parker, you want to rip through your plays for the week, recap them, and then we wrap it up. I'm going to tell you right now that we have an Iowa comment that I want to make sure gets thrown on screen before we sign off.
Oh, love it. Love it. Yeah. So mine for the Big Ten, I like Northwestern under 3 and get that at -110 at Circa. Last I checked, Penn State +600 at FanDuel to win the conference. Again, just doing some back of the envelope math on their win probabilities in splitting Michigan and Ohio State. And then the flyer I took for Big Ten was Nebraska +6,500. A lot of returning production, a lot of returning offensive line, like what Matt Rhule is doing there. In the MAC, I'm going to go Toledo under 9 -105 at DraftKings. I'm trusting the Jason Campbell effect is directionally downward. Jason Candle, excuse me, effect is directionally downward. And then for Northern Illinois, is my flyer at +2,500 to win the conference. We're trusting the high ceiling of an experienced quarterback in Rocky Lombardi, who should be healthy this season. Douglas, what do you got for plays today?
My leadoff was Wisconsin over 8.5 wins this year. You can get that at -130 at DraftKings. Braylon Allen will just be too good in that high-profile offense. Got Michigan State under 5. That's plus money, +110 at Circa Sports. Circa Sports just giving away money this year. That is my other win total of the Big Ten. My flyer is in line with yours. Nebraska 20-1 to win the Big Ten West. Only the West. And my real bet is Wisconsin +130 to win the West. That's available via DraftKings. In the MAC, I went under Ball State's 5.5. You're paying some juice, -142 at FanDuel, but I think 5 is just far and away too high. And then I'm taking a flyer in Eastern Michigan to win the MAC at 8-1 at Caesars. And then I'm going to be comfortable with Ohio at +280 via DraftKings to win the MAC. To wrap up our plays today on Never Punt, Never Parlay, part of the Hammer Betting Network on the Hit the Books HQ feed. Now, Never Punt, Never Parlay was not intended to fade Iowa. And I have to point out that we had somebody show up in our comments and say they played Iowa to win the Big Ten West today. So Mikey Lobet's thrilled for you. Are you going to have fewer than 6 punts per game this year? I'm 25 points per game is the contract incentive for Brian Ferentz, and I suspect we will mention that over and over again this fall.
Yeah, we need a tracker. Maybe we get a graphic that's Iowa points per game tracker.
I'm just going to write it on legal pad and hold it up every week.
That's much more appropriate than any graph is the legal pad there. Yeah, Douglas, always a good time. Enjoy doing these. And we will be back next week with, I don't even know if we've decided on who we're doing next week. Do you want to decide right now on air?
We've decided. Don't play coy. ACC, Conference USA. And since we're doing the ACC, we'll probably discuss a small team in Northwestern Indiana.
Yeah, I think that fits well. And I wasn't being coy. I just legitimately forgot. And now I remember that we do have a schedule and we are planning for the show and doing prep. And it's very fun. Hope that all of you will join us. Make sure you like, subscribe, the Hammer, and Hit the Books HQ over on YouTube. Follow Douglas on Twitter at @D_Farmer, me on Twitter at Stats of War. And with that, we are out for this week.